The stroke of freestyle technique is constantly evolving, from Spitz to Popov to Thorpe to Popovich. The world has seen many great freestyle legends, but has recent swimming sensation Zhanle mastered the art of freestyle swimming? And what lessons can we learn from the current fastest 100 meters freestyler in the world? Okay, so here at Propulsion Swimming, we're really excited to be launching a new series that's going to be coming to you guys every Tuesday, called Technical Tuesday. Not too much imagination in the titling of that series, but essentially what we really want to do is break down for you guys some of the best swimmers in the world, their technique, what makes them so special, and really importantly, what you guys can learn from them. Whether that is you want to start learning just the fundamentals of front crawl and you're doing your first swimming lessons, or you're a national level swimmer and you want to see what a world record holder does so that you can improve your personal best times. And in this series, essentially, that's what we're going to be doing best. And for the first episode of this series, we're going to be taking a look at the new world record holder in the 100 meters freestyle, Zhanle. So it's no secret, at the Paris Olympic Games, he knocked a massive 0.4 of a second off the 100 meters freestyle world record. The technique that enabled him to do this is pretty unique. We've spent a fair few hours sitting down with the tape of various different swims, not just that Paris one, to see what makes him special and what you guys can learn from, I would say at this point, this front crawl master. So what we're going to do as part of these Technical Tuesday videos that are going to be coming to you guys every week on the Propulsion Swimming channel is we're going to be breaking apart the strokes of these elite swimmers into 5 different categories. And the first of these categories is body position. So let's take a look at the footage and see what makes Pan's freestyle body position so unique. Okay, so the best place to start looking at the body position of Pan's stroke is above the water. And the first thing you see straight away when you look at his technique is he's very high in the water, but unlike a gallop or a traditional gallop stroke, there isn't much up and down with how he swims. You can see his head is incredibly high in the water, but it stays high in the water. Very different to previous world record holder David Popovich. He almost gets his whole face out of the water, but only at certain points in his stroke. Now, a high head position can be good, but it can also be bad because you think your body in the water is a bit of a pendulum. So the higher your head is, the lower sometimes your hips can go and the lower your feet can go, which puts you in not a very optimum streamlined position or angle in the water. But when you transfer the camera position to under the water, his hips, remarkably, actually stay very high in the water for someone who has such a high head position. And I think this is one of the uniqueness of Pan's stroke that really stands him out away from the rest of the 100 meters freestylers that you see in the modern day of swimming. Traditionally, it's the gallop technique. It is enabling a lot of, well, it's a very high head position, but there's a bit more up and down wave to the motion that he just doesn't have here in a flat technique. And another difference from the gallop stroke to what we're seeing here is that the gallop stroke enables a lot of rotation, but Pan actually, again, if you watch this underwater footage through, has next to no rotation. That hip position that you're seeing there, it's barely moving. That applies further up his body position with his shoulders. They're barely rotating in the water. Yes, the best at the gallop stroke don't overly have the hip rotation. You can see in this video the lane closer to the camera is Matt Richards from Great Britain, and actually his gallop stroke doesn't have a huge amount of hip rotation, but he does in the shoulders, he does in the upper torso. Pan doesn't have that, and we'll get to his arms soon. This isn't overly what I would teach really with a freestyle technique, but it works. It makes him the fastest swimmer in the world, so we'll carry on through with the rest of the points of this stroke analysis and see why it does work. Now, the final element is the neutral head position, whether he's breathing or not breathing within his stroke. And we'll get to the breathing a little bit later in the video, but it stays in line with his body the whole time. And this above the pool shot shows it perfectly that, yes, it's a little bit grainy footage, but actually it really helps show that that head is perfectly still in terms of like his whole body alignment. It is neutral. It is not moving whatsoever. Even when he's breathing, it's the perfect axis from head to toe. And it stays head to toe, straight line, no veering off to create any further drag at all. Okay, so the second of 5 elements that we're going to look through in this stroke analysis is the legs. And what you'll see from a lot of freestylers these days is their legs actually come remarkably high out of the water. You don't see it as much because they're so fast. You're not really focusing at the back end of their stroke. But when you look at a lot of the underwater footage that you get at major competitions, you can really see just how high the feet come out of the water. Now, most of his leg kick comes from his quads and his hips, and he's actually got a very big knee bend, bigger than most. And if you look at this freeze frame that I've just paused this footage on, it's near enough 45 degrees, and his foot is pretty much from this shot all the way, if not quite a long way, out of the water. So when you're next trying to improve your freestyle technique, when you're doing a kick session, give this a go. Let your knee bend a lot more than you think it should. And clearly there's a huge amount of power in this leg kick from not just Pan. This is a theme running through a lot of the best freestylers in the world. The kick is kind of an underrated momentum part of the freestyle stroke that can get forgotten because, well, arms actually make up, I think it's like 70% of the power and leg kick is 30%. But the momentum for this technique and the drive that goes forward is leg based. Okay, now while I said the legs of Pan's technique is like the momentum starter of how he swims freestyle, it's the arm pull which is the really interesting part, which ties everything together. Okay, so over the water, his overarm recovery, when looking at this side-on view, his elbows are really quite low. They really don't come very high in the water. Again, this ties together with his rotation. Because he's so flat in the water and there really is very minimal upper body rotation, he's pretty much swinging his arms over the water rather than raising his elbows. If you take a look at the over the water shot that we saw earlier, you can see again, there's a big, like almost wingspan to how his stroke goes. It's not narrow how he's swimming here. Above the water, those arms are going really quite wide. And then when you go under the water, something maybe even more unique compared to the gallop stroke happens. He allows his stroke to carry on developing after his hand has entered. Pan almost takes that second to extend a little bit further in the water, possibly because he hasn't got that rotation in his stroke that enables him to do it above the water. But he does have that little pause as he's reaching out in front of himself. Now that doesn't mean he doesn't have a high wrist on entry. He absolutely does. There's barely any splash, as you can see. There's pretty much no bubbles underneath his hand as he's entering the water. This comes from flexible wrists. You can see as we carry on this stroke cycle through, right at the back end of his stroke, as he kicks his wrist out, there's another like flex there. And it's a little bit like you're taught on the butterfly beyondy drill. He's kicking his hand straight out of the water and then carrying it on with the throw through. There's constant power all over this stroke. There's no, well, maybe the only pause is where he's reaching that tiny bit further in front of himself. But other than that, this is just brute force with an arm pull that is incredibly strong. Now, if we go from his wrist to his elbow, obviously high elbows are incredibly important in the stroke of freestyle, but maybe if we look at his left arm, which is his breathing arm, and we'll get to breathing next, it's a very wide high elbow, like really wide high elbow actually, a little bit like how wide he is out of the water. There's no narrowness about this part of the stroke. Now there's pros and cons obviously from doing this. It's powerful, like it's a lot more powerful, but I wouldn't overly recommend doing this if you're maybe going maybe even above 100, because his 200 in Paris wasn't too special, because it reduces the streamlined nature of your stroke. There's no doubt about it. The wider you go in the water, the more you're away from your head position, your hips. You're reducing that streamlined nature. But over 100 meters, over 50 meters, I've not got a problem with it. I quite like it, obviously. Okay, like I said, the next section, and what links really nicely to that wide left arm pull, is the breathing. So this is the next part of the stroke analysis, and again, something really unique to Pan's stroke. He breathes early, he breathes often, and he breathes early. Obviously, breathing every other stroke allows you to get in the oxygen that you need to for, as we've already gone through, like the arm pull, the power, the high energy consumption that this stroke is really going to give you. It's not 50 meters, you're going to need to breathe. So breathing every other stroke is how you do it. How Pan goes about breathing every other stroke, though, he's really quite flat in the water. Again, like the body position, like what we've talked about, there's no up and down movement. There's very little change to where he is in the water. This is low. This is flat. It's low. And there's maybe one more thing about how he breathes, and more when he breathes. Very, very early. He breathes before his left arm comes out of the water. So think in your technique that you're taking to the swimming pool next time you go to a session, have a think about when you're actually taking that breath and whereabouts your hand is on that side that you're breathing on. For me, I can usually see my hand when I'm breathing. Zhanle's hand right now is at his hip. It's not even out of the water yet. He gets his breath in and it's under. Before that hand has gone past his shoulder, his head is back into that neutral position, entirely streamlined. It's fast, it's early, it's often. Give it a go, because that really ties everything together. The body position, the arm pull, and breathing that early in the stroke enables him to stay so high in the water, so neutral in the water. I guess that kind of eats into the fifth part of the stroke analysis that maybe I've already gone over in the breathing portion of this, but essentially overall timing of his stroke as he's throwing or swinging, as we've already talked about, that recovery arm over the top of the water. His underarm pull, that part of his cycle, is already driving to his hips. There's literally no pause in his momentum, other than maybe that tiny little pause at the start where he's reaching a little bit further. But like the timing of his cycle means that there's very little, if any, dead spots that kill the momentum. And I mean, like, even I can go into the technical analysis of the splits that caused his 100 meters freestyle world record. It doesn't look like the momentum ever stopped in those splits. And when you take a look at his stroke, you understand why. There isn't any momentum shifting parts in the stroke whatsoever. It is just this one single constant speed, constant resistance, constant timing throughout the whole of his freestyle technique. Okay, so that just about rounds up our first Technical Tuesday video here from Propulsion Swimming, as we take a look at the world's fastest freestyle technique over 100 meters from Zhanle. If there's any swimmers that you want us to take a look at, you want us to break down, if you've noticed anything unique in their stroke that you want us to take a look at, let us know in the comment section below. But until then, I'll see you guys in 1 week's time with another fantastic technique for you to learn from. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.